Okay, so we're here at Coles Creek, New York State Park. We've got a great waterfront lot, and I had a few minutes before we go just to kind of get caught up on a few unanswered questions on the Landwheel. Those questions are, do the new polycarbonate shells work? How are the wheels doing? And how are the batteries doing? Quick little recap, that's my boosted board. This is my Landwheel where I've put two together and set up 8 wheels because I like a nice big long board because I'm about a 220 to 230 pound rider depending upon how close it is to Christmas. So this is great for me. Also love the boosted board. Got the extended range battery. I made my own little skid plate, which gets used quite often because I live in Ottawa, which has terrible roads, so I'm constantly jumping on it to bounce over the cracks and often hitting the skid plate, but that's working great. And so for these Landwheels that I've got mounted on here, I've got these metal plates because these old ABS shells, they were breaking at the screw posts, which are underneath, and they were falling off, and that was causing all sorts of bad things. But I got a bunch of the new polycarbonate shells. I mounted 2 of those on a board. I'll probably do it as a little inset right here when I edit the video. And what I did, I didn't want to wreck any of my internals on the Landwheels. So the board that I set up, I took off this battery cover, I took out the ESC, and I set 2 of those up on a board so I could first drop them from this height here. I did 20 of those drop tests. The one on the front, I used the original 1/2 inch Landwheel screws, and the one on the back, on the other board, I upgraded to 3/4 inch screws. Basically I didn't think it was going to work. I thought metal clamps were going to be kind of needed forever on Landwheels, but I was wrong. So these drop tests were onto asphalt. So it was pretty brutal. It went way beyond what you'd expect a skateboard to endure. But when I took them apart, there were no broken posts. With the 1/2 inch screws, one screw had actually popped out, but it didn't break the post. So the polycarbonate is pretty resilient to allow one of the 9 screws to pop out during one of the impacts and not actually break the post. So that was cool. And the one with the 3/4 inch screws was completely intact. They also did pretty well with battery ejections. Now when I took all these parts out, it left some slack for the battery, so I stuck a bit of styrofoam SM to take up the slack. I did a better job on one than the other. So the one that had the better styrofoam, I didn't get a single battery ejection on all 20 drops. The other one, the foam was a bit loose, and with the slack, I did get a couple battery ejections, but I don't think that's representative of what's going to happen on the road. So my conclusion on the polycarbonate shells is that it depends on the type of roads that you drive on. If you're in California and there's no winter and the roads are great, I don't see any reason to do any kind of reinforcement. If you have really horrible roads due to winters, like are the case in Ottawa, then you might want to still go with the Velcro strap just as a final precaution, or alternatively you might want to upgrade to 3/4 inch screws, which I think has an advantage. Now for my test unit that I did all the drop tests on, I also towed it behind this on some really horrible roads for about 20-30 kilometers, and I took it apart and I already told you the findings. So talk about a few other things. Some people complain about the Landwheel motor wheels in that the polyurethane wears out and chips, and that is true, but they are cheap and they're easy to replace. And I talked to them about why they chose a different polyurethane for the motor wheels than they did for the regular wheels, and the answer was that they chose a softer one to absorb more vibration. And it is true that they absorb more vibration. Overall, I'm not sure it was the best choice because I think durable wheels are a little bit more important, but I've probably put 500, 750 kilometers on this, maybe even 1,000. There's no tracking on it, but I drive it every week and I go for long rides. So even though they don't look that great after some good distance, they're not falling apart. And in the forums that I participate, I haven't seen anyone complain about them actually falling apart. So I think they're not ideal, but they're good enough to last probably a couple years before you got to switch them, and then you got some spares on hand. So the last thing I want to talk about, I'm going to sit down for, is how you use these. If you use any electric skateboard wrong, you're going to cause problems. And I'll give the boosted board example first. I know of someone who put these giant 110 millimeter wheels on a boosted board. They had an extended range battery. A week later, their extended range battery wasn't working, wasn't taking a charge. And I watched some of the videos for people who put those giant wheels on, and they comment on how hot the motors get, and they comment about how much more difficult it is to accelerate. And so I wasn't really surprised to hear that with kind of an abusive size of wheel on the boosted board, that the battery didn't do too well. It's got a lot of algorithms inside the computer that's in here to throttle the battery so that it doesn't damage the lithium cells. And when you put that much extra stress on it, I'm not surprised that it messes with those algorithms. So and then kind of in comparison with the Landwheel, something that's kind of neat about these, and also quite different from others, is that these batteries have a BMS inside, and the BMS is used during charging, but during running, the BMS gets bypassed. It's a different set of terminals. And you heard me talk in the past about these split terminals inside the Landwheel. So I'm not sure which one of it. Either these two are split or these two are split. And one of them is for charging, and one of them is for regenerative braking or charging, and then the other one is for drawing power during acceleration. And so when it comes to protecting the battery during acceleration and driving, it's really all up to the ESC. Now, the advantage of this is that it is really torquey, especially if you're a rider who's under 175, 160 pounds. Just one of these drives can accelerate much faster than a boosted board, which is pretty impressive. But the downside is that if you don't follow the basic instructions in the manual, which is when you're remote, this one's a double remote because I made a four-wheel drive Landwheel, but when your remote vibrates, stop using it. When the unit powers down, because there's not enough power, don't start it up again and keep going, because there's nothing inside the BMS to stop that kind of abuse from bringing the lithium cells down below the level where they'll no longer function. And so I know of a number of people who have a daily commute that's just a little bit beyond what the range of a Landwheel is, and they quickly wreck their batteries because they keep pushing it and pushing it. And it's not really a proper use of it. Myself, I wrecked 2 batteries before I figured out that I was doing things wrong, because that's what I was doing. I was, gotta go a little farther. Actually, the first time I got this back in January, I wanted to do a maximum range test, and so I kept pushing it, starting it up again, and sure enough, it's when I got back to my destination and tried to charge up, one of my batteries wouldn't take a charge, and it never worked again. So usage is important. They're pretty cool batteries. The swappable's nice. The way that it can really power the ESC, bypassing the BMS to give that really torquey pull is cool. But you need to understand how to use it and how to follow the instructions in their manual, or you will wreck these batteries. So since I figured out the proper way to use Landwheel and the batteries, I had no failures. And so what I do is when it vibrates, I probably shut down within a minute or two. I ride until the third blue light maybe starts flashing. As soon as the third blue light starts flashing, I know it's time to swap batteries. And I never, ever, ever ride on the last light, the red light. That red light is telling you to stop, and you really got to follow that instructions. So if you do get a Landwheel and what do we got here?
I'm gonna lick your butt while you're talking.
Oh, why did you stop?
Oops, I recorded that. You want to leave it on there?
Sure.
No.
Let me see. So I think that's just about that's just about it. So overall, very happy with the Landwheel. I ride it about twice as much as I do the boosted board because my weight in particular, I like the acceleration, I like the extra speed. On range, if you put 2 batteries in here and you carry 2 spares, you'll be able to do better than a boosted board with the extended range. With just 2 batteries in here, the boosted board will probably go about 3 or 4 kilometers further than this with 2 batteries. And that's about it. I hope that kind of information is good. I hope to do one more video with my skateboard club in Ottawa to get people out with a bunch of different boards, the Meepos and the Raptors and the Evolves, and do kind of a speed and acceleration and hill climbing test. And we'll see if I can put something like that together in the next couple months or so. And until then, it's about a good height. And here we go. Okay, so battery stayed in. 2. Battery did not stay in. Battery stayed in. Battery stayed in. How many are we up to? Getting close to 10. That's stuck. I'm gonna just drop it to get it out. Okay, so this battery keeps falling out. It's an old prototype one that was printed off a 3D printer. So I'm just gonna reverse these so I can just be certain that I'm blaming the right thing. And it's just not fitting tight. Okay, let's do a couple more drop tests. I think this little block here is just leaving too much slack. Let's see if I can squeeze this one in here. Okay. I think it was I just didn't have it blocked in there tight enough. Okay, so there it is. I think that's about 20 drops. Now I'm going to take it apart and see how the post fared.